London, Ontario. I am the lead minister for Riverside United Church here in London, Ontario. I started when I was like 6 years old, did the primary camp,
Yeah.
and then was a camper all the way through. Took a summer off before starting on staff. Worked on staff for, I believe it was 4 years, then took a year off, and then came back to work on senior staff for one additional year. That extended it actually into the fall and early part of the winter as well. Really transformative, I think, is what, and not really transformative, but transformative is the word. But yeah, when I think about who I was, particularly when I think about my years on staff, my first year on staff versus my last year on staff, I don't even recognize the person who I was before my time at Pearce Williams, as opposed to the time at the end. And I suppose, yes, all of my years as a camper helped to transform me as an individual. But in particular, those years in high school, yeah, that was critical. Yeah, well, I think certainly camp has played a major role during my high school years. Faith was something that really, my church experience was not as strong as some during those high school years. Pearce Williams was a place of discernment for me, and it was actually during my experience as a senior staff member that really felt that call to ministry, and I didn't know what that would look like, but anyway, had spent a number of years pursuing a broadcasting career. That was during a time where radio broadcasting was really shifting and changing drastically. Took a job after my broadcasting studies, but really felt the call to ministry. And so my first job was actually doing the dual role of being a youth minister as well as a camp director at Kennesary Camp, a place known to you, Joe. That's
Very
where
well, yes.
we met. Yeah, and so spent 3 years there as the director and as the youth coordinator for Kent Presbytery, working with 41 churches in that area. Then decided, yeah, I think ministry is for me. Found myself back in London. Grew up in St. Thomas, not far from Pearce Williams. Went to the United States for 7 years. Worked for the Presbyterian Church. It's where I got married, and both my daughters were born there, and came back to Canada to do some camp directing at Lambton Centre. And then after that, went and did my MDiv, finished my studies, and got officially ordained. So that's sort of a little snapshot of where I got to where I am today, with camp being a critical part of that. Really, sort of kind of looking at the snapshot of it, I have so many memories of laughter as a camper, as a counselor, around the campfire. And I often share actually my memory as an older camper. This would have been in the last, 3 or 4 years of my time as a camper. Had a great counselor, Daryl, who he was one of those guys that you just, as soon as you knew that he was going to be your counselor, you were like, oh, we're going to have a great week. And for whatever reason, myself and another camp counselor or camper, Neil, who always ended up in the same cabin group, we had developed this thing where we would just we called it the freeze. And we would be eating a meal or something like that, or, walking from one event to the next, and we would just kind of freeze randomly. And then Daryl, to sort of give you an idea of, what the camp experience was like, Daryl started to do this as well. Here he is leading a campfire, and he's doing the freeze, and we're just tickled. Well, I share this story sometimes when I'm, doing sermons and things like that. Years later, Daryl was the best man for my cousin's wedding. And he's like, I've got to introduce you to my wife. Dave is the inventor of the freeze. And I had forgotten all about this. And his wife says, we'll be walking in the mall, and all of a sudden I'm talking to a stranger next to me because Daryl's like, 50 feet back, frozen, doing the freeze, which I thought that was just so fantastic. A counselor that decided to engage in that kind of playful, fun, life of a 12-year-old boy, and made a lasting memory for us. So, and for him too. For whatever reason, the Martian hop was always a favorite of mine. Just simple, and yeah, kids love it. So still play the Martian hop. Pick up the guitar and play that song. So yeah, one of my favorites. I think just the upfront leadership that comes from camp. That was really my first experience with leading in front of people, not only kids, but your peers. I think there's no replacing that upfront leadership that you get and the confidence that you get. I think maybe that was the big piece for me, was that in learning to lead, in learning to engage, young people and work with your peers in a playful environment, you learn a lot about yourself. And I discovered, found that I had a voice, found that I had the courage to do the kind of things that I would have never learned without camp. I love this line of done is better than perfect. There's something about that. Young entrepreneur shared that with me, and I thought that's a good thing. Especially, I'm a kind of a creative person, and so it's easy to move from one idea to the next and never really form things. And sometimes you're always, looking for perfection, thinking that that's the goal. But there are times where you just have to kind of recognize that, done is better than perfect. So much. Currently, I'm reading a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, his first work of fiction. He's normally like an African-American essayist, but his first book called The Water Dancer, that is about the times of slavery in the American South. And he's just an amazing guy. Actually, he has done a lot of work with graphic novels and in that whole kind of Black Panther and that whole comic universe, which I deeply respect. Here's this guy that is a learned individual, which has accomplished a great deal, and yet is playful enough and recognizes the power of story. Really starting to enjoy that. It's an amazing writer, but that's what I'm currently reading. I would say, there's quite a few people that I'd love to see on this. Certainly, somebody like Maya Landau might be a good person. Let's think of who's another one that, of course, you've given me these questions ahead of time, and all these names kind of came to me. I'd actually be curious. Just saw this person recently, Nick Baird, who is a brewmaster, who owns and runs Beer Lab here in London, Ontario. Know Nick from Pearce Williams' days there. I'd be curious to have Nick answer these questions.